Welcome everyone to a video review. I'm your host Scottish William 92. This isn't going to be my typical review. Normally I would do a Wii review in which I answer the simple question whether it's worth it or not, but I can't really do it with the movies that I'm about to review. I'm going to be reviewing multiple movies. Firstly, if you don't know, The Amazing Spider-Man has recently come out in cinemas. I haven't seen it yet. I do plan on seeing it fairly shortly. And I am planning on reviewing it. As you know, I am a big superhero fan, and I do review as many superhero films as I possibly can see. But I can't really review The Amazing Spider-Man when I eventually do see it, which I'm hoping I'll see it sometime this week or next week at the latest, depending on when I can get money for it. I can't review those movies without reviewing these. The Spider-Man Trilogy. I've got the box set here. I've got all three of them here. And I'm not going to review these in too much detail. I'm just going to give my overall summary of all three movies and what I thought of all three of them in general and how they stand as a trilogy. I'm wearing my superhero gloves for this, so let's get this review started. So, firstly, we've got to talk about the movies individually as an aspect. I'm not going to go into too much extensive detail. For those that haven't seen the Spider-Man movies, which is kind of idiotic because I'm pretty sure everyone has seen the Spider-Man movies. They came out, I think it's hard to tell, 2002. It was the first one, Spider-Man. And I will say this, right, the first movie was a really good movie in my opinion. It wasn't, after actually going back and actually re-watching these movies, I just finished re-watching them last night. I just went, no fuck it, I'll do a marathon and watch all three of them. They have not aged well. When you first see all three movies, especially Spider-Man 1 in particular, they haven't aged too well. Going back and watching it especially. When I first saw Spider-Man, it was fantastic. I loved it. I saw all three of these films in the cinema. The first Spider-Man was a fantastic film for me in the cinema. But then, of course, I watched it later on in life. Like I said, I watched it last night. And it hasn't aged well. There are a lot of problems I have with the trilogy in general after re-watching them. And the first one in particular, of course you have to comment, not only with the first one, but with all of them, the special effects aren't fantastic, especially when it comes to the CGI effects. Some of them are downright laughable, especially in the first one. You can't tell me you didn't take those fucking things seriously. They were fucking hilariously bad, especially the parts where Spider-Man is jumping all over the place. But the first one was really good, really enjoyable. Still to this day, it's a kind of a cheesy film again in my opinion, because originally I thought the cast was well done, but now that I think about it after rewatching them, especially for all three of the films, the only cast members that really stand out for me in particular is the actress that played Mary Jane. I thought she actually done the best job in the series, even though every 5 minutes she does kind of scream and always gets kidnapped no matter what. Which is kind of fucking dull. I hate that. I'm sorry. But as I say, Spider-Man 1 was a decent film. It still is a decent film to this day, but I'll get into more detail with it when I talk about the movies in general. Spider-Man 2 is of course the best of the trilogy in my opinion, because it had great characterization, great villain. Dr. Octopus is always a good favourite. And it had an overall great story, still incredibly cheesy in some parts, and I'll get to that later on. Spider-Man 3, of course, is the worst of the trilogy, but I'll go into much more detail on that when I talk about the villains. So firstly, I'm going to do it in this order. I've kind of rambled on for like probably 3 minutes already, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to review the villains first, and then I'm going to review Spider-Man's character. Because I think that's what I have to do. Like, did the trilogy do a good job with the villains, and did it do a good job with Spider-Man? And then, of course, I'll talk a wee bit about Mary Jane and Harry Osborn and all that. Firstly, let me just say, we all know the curse of the Spider-Man films, which, well, mostly the curse of superhero films in general for many, many years, was that the villain always died. And that none more so than in the Spider-Man trilogy. I think there's only one villain out of the entire trilogy who survived, and that's Sandman. And that's kind of sad, because Sandman isn't exactly a mainstream Spider-Man villain. But here's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about quickly the individual villains in total. Firstly, Green Goblin. Now, I know the guy's name, I just can't remember it. Now, the person who played the Green Goblin, I honestly cannot... I'm horrible when it comes to actors' names. But the person who played Norman Osborn in the Green Goblin, I think he done a good job in my opinion. He isn't the exact way that I pictured the Green Goblin. Like, he really does play it as a Jekyll and Hyde syndrome, which I'm not too... Sorry, Headlight or... Headlight or Hyde, depending on your pronunciation. In my honest opinion, I think he'd done a decent job in my opinion. He really did get the role of the Green Goblin, but in my opinion, he really kind of went over the top in some cases. He didn't do a fantastic job, but he done a good enough job that I can let it slide. He very much so, especially when he's confronting his alter ego, very much Jekyll and Hyde. And that to me isn't really the Green Goblin. The Green Goblin is Norman Osborn. He's a power mad guy. He just wants power, in my opinion. He's intelligent, he knows what he wants, and he'll get it. And in this, he does eventually evolve into that character, especially towards the end when he gets killed, of course. But he really did portray Green Goblin in a fairly reasonable way. He didn't do a fantastic job in my opinion, but it was good enough that you could let it slide. But here's the problem. This is the only villain that I will let it slide that he dies, because I did do research and I do know the fact that Green Goblin, aka Norman Osborn, does die in the comic books and in the animated series, I believe, because I did watch the animated series, just can't remember exactly. He does die, and in the comics he does get impaled by his own glider, so Sam Raimi did remain loyal to that source material, and he does eventually come back to life in the comic books, which they could have done in future films, but they rebooted it, of course. I still don't like the fact that they killed him off. It just kind of always rubs me the wrong way when they kill off a villain, because a superhero's main asset is the villains, in my opinion. If you don't have good villains, you're not going to have a good story. I'm sorry, you can't. So let's move on to Dr. Octopus, or Doc Ock, the best in the Spider-Man trilogy, in my opinion. They took a relatively simple concept for a villain, which was basically a power mad scientist who accidentally got four of his mechanical arms fused to his spine. That's the knowledge of what Dr. Octopus I have does, and turned them into a bit more. They basically, as I dubbed it, the Mr. Freeze effect, which is from the Batman animated series, what they done with Mr. Freeze. They made him a sympathetic villain. Like, there's a reason he lost his wife, his research went up, and he became a very sympathetic villain. And it was done well, in my opinion. It was very done well. He did go a little insane. He did go fucking cuckoo. He went cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. And he did eventually grow on me, and he did become a really good villain, in my opinion. And he's best in the Spider-Man trilogy, although I still don't like the fact that Spider-Man revealed who he was to Dr. Octopus. That still rubbed me the wrong way. I'm sorry, that really pissed me off. Spider-Man doesn't reveal his identity to anyone besides Mary Jane and one or two others, in my opinion. For those who really know him, who are deeply close to him, it made no fucking sense to reveal that with Spider-Man to Dr. Octopus. Eventually, of course, Dr. Octopus falls into the Spider-Man syndrome. He fucking commits suicide and redeems himself. Yeah, another villain on the tally mark. God, that pissed me off. Why do you have to kill off the villain in every superhero movie? You don't have to do that. They need to stay alive to make good stories for potential future story arcs. But yeah, Dr. Octopus is far the best in the trilogy. Now we come to the third one, which in my opinion has the worst villains. They had the new Goblin. He's not the fucking Hobgoblin. For those who don't know, the Hobgoblin is not in Spider-Man Trilogy at all. He's the new Goblin. Harry Osborn, of course, which I hated. I'm sorry, I did not like that one bit. It kind of made sense why he done it, because he figured out who Spider-Man is, which is fucking piss and shit. Punch him in the face, which really pissed me off, no matter how they fucking done it in Spider-Man 2. And of course, he loses memory, comes back, blah blah blah. Don't like it. The Sandman was the only decent villain in Spider-Man 3. He was very well done. They tried to do a Dr. Octopus and Mr. Freeze, making him a sympathetic one, which they kind of succeeded in, but failed miserably in my opinion, because he's not really that great of a villain. I see the potential in him, but in my opinion, the best villain in that movie is the Sandman, because he does become simple and he escapes with his life. He survives the Spider-Man movies and lives. Wow, surprising. And then, of course, we come to the worst rendition and the worst, basically, and I'll get to that in part 2.